The echo of cruel laughter in a courthouse hallway, the clatter of a white cane hitting tile, the gasp of witnesses who saw but did nothing. These sounds would become the opening notes of a story about justice, redemption, and the devastating weight of truth. In the Providence Municipal Courthouse on a Monday morning, a young man stood over an elderly veteran who had crumpled against the wall. The veteran's hands searched blindly for something to steady himself. His assailant's words hung in the air like poison. "You can't hit what you can't see, old man. Stay out of my way next time." Walter Briggs, 76 years old, couldn't see the fist that struck him. He couldn't see the smirk on his attacker's face. He hadn't seen anything since 1972, when shrapnel from a mortar round in Vietnam destroyed both his eyes. But he heard everything: the laughter, the footsteps walking away, the uncomfortable silence of bystanders. What Walter couldn't know, what no one in that hallway understood, was that this moment would unravel a connection 5 decades in the making. A connection that would transform a courtroom hearing into one of the most powerful moments in judicial history. And Judge Frank Caprio, reviewing case files when the commotion reached his chambers, was about to reveal it. Brandon Pierce walked into Judge Caprio's courtroom at 10:22 a.m. with the swagger of someone who believed consequences were for other people. At 19, he had learned that his last name opened doors, dismissed complaints, and made problems disappear. His father was Governor Michael Pierce of Rhode Island. That fact had been Brandon's shield his entire life. The charges against him told a disturbing story. 3 weeks earlier, he had struck Walter Briggs on a Providence street corner, knocking the elderly man to the ground and breaking his cane. When Officer Kyle Donahue responded, Brandon had laughed and suggested that blind people should stay home. He had invoked his father's name, threatened the officer with legal action, and walked away, believing the incident would vanish like all the others before it. But this time was different. This time, Walter Briggs had pressed charges. And this time, Brandon had committed a second assault, in the courthouse itself, mere feet from Judge Caprio's bench. The court clerk, Ms. Reyes, read the charges with visible tension. Case number 2024 CR 1194, the City of Providence versus Brandon Michael Pierce. Charges include assault on a disabled person, contempt of court, harassment, resisting lawful detention, and disorderly conduct. Brandon rolled his eyes. "This is ridiculous. Can we speed this up?" Judge Caprio's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Mr. Pierce, did you just assault a blind man in the hallway of my courthouse?" "I bumped into him. He overreacted." "Witnesses say you punched him." Brandon shrugged with practiced indifference. "Witnesses exaggerate. My father will explain how this works." The arrogance wasn't accidental. Brandon had cultivated it carefully, learning that confidence, even false confidence, could substitute for accountability. His file revealed a pattern: altercations at clubs, verbal abuse of service staff, incidents that were quietly settled before reaching official records. He had never faced real consequences. Until now. Judge Caprio methodically presented the evidence. Body camera footage from the street incident showed Brandon striking Walter from behind, then laughing as the veteran struggled to find his broken cane. Security footage from the courthouse hallway captured the second assault in devastating clarity. Brandon's deliberate punch, Walter's collapse, the cruel words delivered to a man who couldn't see them coming. But it was the text message that revealed Brandon's mindset most clearly. Sent the morning of the hearing, it read, "Court today for that blind guy thing from the street. Dad says judges fold under pressure. Watch me walk out of here by lunch. Nobody touches the governor's son." Judge Caprio read it aloud. Brandon's smirk flickered, but didn't disappear. "That was a private conversation," he said. "It was submitted as evidence. The question is whether it accurately reflects your expectations for this hearing." "It reflects reality. My dad runs this state. You can't touch me." Can't I? He's the governor. He makes appointments. He controls budgets. You think you're immune to that? The courtroom held its breath. The confrontation had moved beyond a simple assault case into something larger, a test of whether power could shield someone from basic decency and accountability. Officer Donahue testified about the street incident. Walter Briggs had been disoriented, asking what happened, unable to understand why someone had struck him. Brandon had been standing 30 feet away with friends, completely unconcerned. When questioned, he had suggested that blind people shouldn't be walking around public streets. Then Walter Briggs himself took the stand. Walter Briggs rose slowly, every movement careful and measured. His white cane rested against the gallery seat behind him. When he spoke, his voice carried quiet dignity. "Your Honor, I've been blind for 52 years. I lost my sight in Vietnam in 1972. Mortar round. I was pulling a wounded soldier to safety when it hit. By the time medics reached me, both my eyes were gone." Judge Caprio asked him to continue. "I've spent half a century learning to navigate a world I can't see. I use a cane. I listen to footsteps. I count my steps. I have never asked for pity, just the basic decency of not being attacked by people who think blindness makes me less than human." Brandon snorted audibly. "Mr. Pierce," Judge Caprio said sharply, "did you just snort during this man's testimony?" "He's milking it for his sympathy." "Soldiers always do." The gallery reacted with visible shock. Walter continued, his composure unshaken. "When I was in the hallway this morning, I heard fast footsteps behind me. I tried to move aside, but I wasn't fast enough. Something hit me hard in the shoulder. I stumbled. My cane fell. And then I heard laughing." "What did the person say?" Judge Caprio asked. "He said, 'You can't hit what you can't see, old man. Stay out of my way next time.'" The words settled over the courtroom like a weight. Judge Caprio reached for a file on his bench, the file he had been waiting to introduce, the file that would change everything. But before he could speak, the courtroom doors opened. Governor Michael Pierce entered quietly, his face carrying an expression his son had clearly never seen before: devastation. "Your Honor," he said. "May I approach?" Brandon's confident posture crumbled. "Dad, tell them how this works. Tell them about the lawyers." "Brandon, stop talking." The words were sharp and final. Governor Pierce walked past his son without looking at him. He stood before Judge Caprio with shoulders bent under invisible weight. "Your Honor, I owe this court an apology, and I owe Mr. Briggs far more than I can ever repay." Judge Caprio opened the file in his hands. "Governor Pierce, I think it's time the court, and your son, learned the full truth about Mr. Briggs." The judge read from a declassified military citation, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtroom. Bronze Star with Valor Device, awarded 1972. Citation for heroic achievement in ground combat against hostile forces in the Republic of Vietnam. Sergeant Walter Briggs, while under intense enemy fire, exposed himself to mortar rounds to drag wounded soldier PFC Michael Pierce to safety. Sergeant Briggs sustained severe injuries, including complete loss of vision. His actions directly saved PFC Pierce's life. The silence that followed was absolute. Brandon's face went white. "Dad, what is this?" Governor Pierce turned to face his son, tears streaming down his face. "In 1972, I was 19 years old. I was wounded in a firefight outside Da Nang. I was bleeding out in the middle of a kill zone. The rest of my unit was pinned down. I was going to die." His voice broke. "Walter Briggs was my squad's medic. He ran into the open. No cover, no protection, and dragged me 50 yards to safety. The mortar round that took his eyes was meant for me. He lost his sight saving my life." The courtroom seemed to stop breathing. "Everything I have," the governor continued, "my career, My family, my son, exists because Walter Briggs refused to leave a 19-year-old soldier behind. I've spent 52 years trying to repay that debt. I've funded veteran programs. I've advocated for disability services. I've tried to honor his sacrifice. He looked at Brandon with raw anguish. And my son punched him twice because he was in the way. Brandon was shaking, tears beginning to fall. Dad, I didn't know. That's not the point. You didn't know he saved my life, but you knew he was blind. You knew he was elderly. You knew he couldn't defend himself. And you attacked him anyway. That's who you've become. That's what I failed to prevent. Walter Briggs spoke then, his voice quiet but unwavering. Governor, I never asked you to carry guilt. I did what any soldier would do. You were my brother. Brothers don't leave each other behind. And now my son has struck you twice in my name. He didn't strike me in your name. He struck me in his own arrogance. There's a difference. Brandon could barely speak through his tears. Mr. Briggs, I didn't know. Walter turned toward his voice. Would it have mattered, son? Would you have treated me differently if you knew I saved your father? Or should you treat every blind man, every veteran, every human being with basic dignity, regardless of their connection to you? Brandon couldn't answer. The question exposed the rot at his core. That's what I thought, Walter said quietly. But there's hope in your silence. Arrogant people don't go silent. They argue. You're not arguing anymore. That's something. Judge Capria waited until the emotion settled before speaking. Mr. Pierce, I want you to understand what has just been revealed. The blind veteran you assaulted twice is the man who saved your father's life. He lost his eyesight dragging your father to safety in Vietnam. Everything you have, your home, your education, your very existence, comes from Walter Briggs's sacrifice. Brandon nodded, standing now because sitting felt wrong. Your father has spent 52 years trying to honor that debt, and you dishonored it in the hallway of this courthouse. Do you understand the weight of that? Yes, Your Honor. I don't think you do, not yet, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to understand it. Judge Caprio outlined the sentence. 200 hours of community service with blindness assistance programs, mobility training certification, an empathy workshop, restitution for the broken cane, a 3,000-word reflective essay on dignity and sacrifice, and a follow-up hearing in 200 days. You will learn how blind individuals navigate the world. You will guide them through streets. You will help them with daily tasks. You will understand what it means to lose the sense you take for granted every moment of every day. Brandon accepted each requirement without protest. For the first time in his life, he understood that he deserved consequences. The months that followed were the hardest of Brandon's life. He showed up at the Providence Blindness Assistance Center expecting hostility, but found something worse: indifference. The staff and clients didn't care who his father was. They cared whether Brandon could guide someone across a street without getting them killed. At first, he couldn't. His spatial awareness was poor, his patience non-existent. He watched from the sidelines as blind clients navigated their lives with grace and skill he had never imagined. They cooked meals without seeing the stove. They read using fingertips. They lived full lives without the sense he had weaponized against them. By week 5, they let him start guiding. His first client was a 73-year-old woman named Eleanor who had lost her sight to diabetes. "You're nervous," she observed as they walked. "I don't want to make a mistake." Everyone makes mistakes. The question is whether you learn from them. I'm trying to learn. I can tell. Your arm is stiff. You're overthinking every step. Relax. Slowly. Brandon developed genuine skill. He learned to see the world through sound, touch, and vibration. He learned to anticipate obstacles. He learned that navigating without sight required more strength and courage than he had ever possessed. In week 16, Walter Briggs came to the center for a new cane fitting. Brandon approached him with his heart pounding. "Mr. Briggs," the elderly veteran turned toward his voice. "Brandon Pierce, I heard you've been working here 4 months now. I finished my required hours last week, but I asked to keep coming." "Why?" "Because I'm not done learning. Because every day I work here, I understand a little more about what I did to you, and it makes me sick." They walked together through the center, Brandon guiding Walter with the skill he had learned through humility and practice. "You're better at this than I expected," Walter said. "I had good teachers, the staff here, and you." "How so?" "Every time I guide someone, I think about what I did to you, about how you couldn't see me coming, about how I laughed. That's guilt. It's more than guilt, it's understanding. I used to think blind people were weak. Now I know that navigating the world without sight takes more strength than I've ever had." Walter stopped walking. "Your father was a scared kid in Vietnam, 19 years old, bleeding out, convinced he was going to die. I didn't save him because he deserved it. I saved him because that's what soldiers do. We don't leave people behind." "And I left you behind. I walked away laughing." "You did, but you're not walking away now. That's something." 200 days after his initial hearing, Brandon returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom. He looked different, the arrogance replaced by quiet awareness. "Mr. Pierce," Judge Caprio said, "I see you've completed all terms of your sentence. The reports say you continued volunteering after your required hours. They say you've become one of their most reliable guides." "Yes, sir. I go twice a week now. I'm helping train new volunteers." "What changed?" Brandon took a breath. "I met people who showed me what courage actually looks like. Eleanor, who lost her sight to diabetes and still lives alone. James, who was blinded in Iraq and still raises his 3 kids. And Mr. Briggs, who saved my father's life and then forgave me even though I didn't deserve it." Walter Briggs rose from the gallery. "Your Honor, may I speak?" "Please. When this started, I was hurt." "Not physically. My body's been through worse. But in my heart I thought, this is what I lost my eyes for. So privileged kids could mock blind veterans." He paused. "But I've listened to the reports about this young man. I've heard how he's changed. Last month he guided me through the center without a single mistake. His hand was steady. His voice was calm. He wasn't the same person who punched me in that hallway." Governor Pierce stood. "Your Honor, 6 months ago I walked into this courtroom filled with shame. My son had assaulted the man who saved my life. I had failed as a father." He looked at Brandon. "I'm proud of you now. Not because you completed your sentence. Because you chose to become someone different. Someone worthy of the sacrifice Walter made for our family." Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Mr. Pierce, you walked into this courtroom 6 months ago believing your father's position made you untouchable. You mocked a man who lost his eyes saving your father's life." "I was wrong about everything." "You were. But being wrong isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. Walter Briggs didn't leave your father behind in 1972. Now you have the chance to honor that sacrifice, to spend your life proving that what he did was worth it." "I will, Your Honor. I promise." Walter spoke one final time. "Governor, you've spent 52 years carrying guilt you didn't need to carry. I didn't save you for gratitude. I saved you because you were my brother." He turned toward Brandon's voice. "And now your son is becoming someone I can call brother too. That's not guilt repaid. That's a legacy continued." Brandon wiped his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Briggs, for everything. For saving my father. For forgiving me. For showing me what real strength looks like. Just live well, son. That's all I ask. Live well and help others when you can." Judge Caprio picked up his gavel. "Case closed, Mr. Pierce. But remember, The measure of a person isn't the power they inherit. It's the character they build, one act of decency at a time. The gavel fell. In a Providence courtroom, a young man who had once believed his father's position made him untouchable, discovered that the only inheritance worth having is the courage to become better than you were. Note: this story is a dramatization created for storytelling and educational purposes. It is not legal advice or factual reporting.